Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast.
Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Joining us in just a minute is one of the outstanding recruiting writers from the Wolverine On3, Zach Libby. Most of us thought that after back-to-back Big Ten championships and trips to the playoffs, recruiting would take off for the class of 24. That hasn't happened as quickly as some of you hoped it would, but we had two big-time verbals last week, and everyone around the program thinks more are on the way. The class of 24 is ranked number 8 in the country and number 2 in the Big Ten, behind Ohio State right now. This weekend is another star-studded visit weekend in Ann Arbor. Joining me to discuss that and more recruiting news is Zach Libby from the Wolverine On3. So stay with us. Joining us on our game day segment today to talk recruiting is recruiting writer Zach Libby from the Wolverine On3. And Zach does such a great job, he and EJ Holland, keeping us all up to date on what's happening on the recruiting trail. So it's finally great to get you on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having me. No, I appreciate it, and looking forward to talking some recruiting with you.
Especially when it's been so busy on the recruiting trail right now in the last few weeks, Zach. Things heating up, as we know, and there's been a lot of good news for Michigan fans. Last week, 4-star running back Jordan Marshall, who is from Cincinnati Moeller in that great Catholic league down there, gave his verbal. And to say the least, that is a huge commitment, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Jordan Marshall is the highest-ranked verbal commit that Michigan has landed since Will Johnson, 2 classes before. I mean, this is the number 6 overall running back in the country and the number 2 recruit in the state of Ohio. I mean, as a player, he really fits the mold of that prototypical, Big Ten running back. Hard-nosed, in between the tackles, lower the shoulder, prefers to run over defenders than be fancy with his evasiveness. He's very methodical, I think, in the sense where he's not really looking for that home run carry on every down. Instead, picking up 5 yards here, gain 6 yards on the next attempt. But, over time, he can use his 5'11" and 190 pound frame simply just to wear down opposing clubs physically and mentally. I think he's over time when you get them to break, you can he's back to break for significant gains, whether that's running up the B gap or coming up the field along the sideline. He's someone you got to respect every time he's on the field, obviously, and someone who's going to be an every down tailback at the next level. I mean, he continues to model his game after Blake Corum, and that should be the expectation for him once he's enrolled in Michigan. As a human being and really a student athlete, I mean, he values the educational opportunities at Michigan. He wants to study pre-law or learn how to create his own business that helps out children. He said before in interviews with us that he really loves how the fan base shows love and support for every sport. He actually attended a hockey game once in January during one of his visits. And he said that experience alone shattered any other experience that he had on any visit. And I mean, this is a kid who never really watched hockey growing up. So as a recruit, who needed just 4 unofficial visits, quite frankly, I mean, less than that, to be honest, to really understand and recognize and revel in the culture of Ann Arbor and the Michigan community. This is no question that this is a commitment that I think fans should be really excited for.
Well, what's also big in the recruiting process of young Mr. Marshall is how involved Mike Hart was. And we all know you guys over there at the Wolverine On3, and I hear it from my listeners, they wanted to see Mike Hart get more involved, go after a 4- and 5-star back in this cycle and in the future. And hey, he went head-to-head with Ryan Day down there on Buckeye turf, and he won. What's especially funny is that Marshall had promised Ohio State they would be his last official visit, and that's not going to happen. So tip of the hat to Mike Hart. Great recruiting job.
Yeah, I think recruits really appreciate coaches who are recruiting them who are wearing the same colors that they donned as players themselves, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
With Hart, I mean, obviously, fans consider him the greatest running back, arguably in Michigan history. So I think the opportunity to learn from him for 3 to 5 years was something that Marshall wanted and obviously spoke time and time again. The relationship got to the point where they were communicating literally every single day. Sometimes in their conversations, Hart would give Marshall some tips and hints, advice of how to further development while still in high school, which in turn has resulted in just giving them hints and tricks before they start working together in Ann Arbor. Hart also built a close relationship with both of Marshall's parents, who has obviously taken in the atmosphere of the big house and, been around the facilities and everything. So, I mean, for Hart to secure Marshall's commitment after his latest return this past weekend, which came almost 3 months earlier than when Marshall was originally expected to make a decision. I think it just goes to show that the running backs coach has the ability to be a trademark recruiter, in my opinion, especially with this generation's running backs who are fully aware of Michigan's commitment to running the ball and Hart's nurturing or development of guys in the past and currently, like Hassan Haskins, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, soon to be Cole Cabana, and Benjamin Hall. As a mentor figure, I honestly don't think running back prospects can get much better than having Mike Hart by their side. So, again, really big win to land Marshall in this class.
Well, the other huge pickup last week came from the Buckeye State also. Offensive tackle Ben Roebuck. He's from Cleveland St. Edwards, another Cleveland Catholic League kid. And again, extra sweet that he is a highly regarded player from Ohio, Zach.
As you said, offensive tackle for St. Edwards, which is the top high school football program in the state of Ohio. They have won back-to-back state titles at the highest division of the OHSAA. Of all the schools that are in that respective division, if you combine that talent, I think it'll stack up against any other division in any other state. So, but what made the Roebuck commitment happen this early was the fact that he took 4 unofficial visits in a span of 4 months, less than 4 months, honestly. So going back to mid-December, including twice in the month of March on back-to-back weekends. So in total, he's been on campus for 6 times in total, yeah. So currently he's measuring in at 6'7" and 340 pounds, according to On3. So essentially a true tackle. Outside of his physical stature, he's simply a winner. And he's going to a program that's done nothing but steamroll through the Big Ten these past 2 seasons. I mean, he has good length. He holds a mean streak in the run game. He'll have to shed some of that unnecessary weight, which will help with his lighter footwork and balance. But I think overall credit needs to be given to both offensive coordinator and offensive line coach Jerome Moore and area recruiter Steve Klingscale for prioritizing Roebuck these past several months and taking the relationship to the next level after every visit.
Well, we're doing a great job down in Ohio, and it appears we are not done yet, or we are still in on some other really big-time kids, aren't we?
Yeah, in the 2024 class alone, Michigan is heavily targeting 7 prospects who have visited at least once going back these past couple of years. The first one that we have to mention is 4-star edge Brian Robinson out of Austin Town. He visited last week, which was his 8th time in total, more than any other school that is on his offer sheet. Penn State and Kentucky are really pushing hard for him too. Kentucky has a lot of Youngstown connections with their Mark Stoops and Vince Morrow, both from Youngstown as well. But the Youngstown connections are also with Steve Klingscale, which has kept Michigan at the top. If you didn't know, or if fans didn't know, Steve Klingscale and Brian Robinson's father actually grew up together in Youngstown, like literally one street over. So they've known each other since little kids. And that friendship has continued as, 40-year-old men I fully expect Robinson to commit. We don't know of a timeline yet. I don't think he's a kid that's just going to drop his commitment. I think there's going to be an announcement and a planned thing. So I think fans will know when that comes. But he's talked a lot about the atmosphere of the big house. He's seen quite a few games. He's talked about every defensive assistant on the coaching staff, including defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, obviously Klingscale, defensive line coach Mike Elston, outside linebackers coach Dylan Roney. This is a full collective effort. And outside the football team, the family loves the educational aspect, and that comes first in this recruitment. And, Michigan has one of the best educational resources in the country. So I think it's all there for Michigan to land Brian at some point. The nation's number 2 cornerback, Aaron Scott. He's another one that fans should know. I actually drove out to his school on Thursday, the day before this recording, to get an update of how his viewpoint of Michigan has changed following his return visit this past Sunday. He made his first ever visit in January, getting to watch how Steve Klingscale operates in practice setting with the defensive back group, I think was a huge difference maker in Michigan climbing up Scott's list. If, let's say, Scott ends up committing to Michigan, I think reactions on social media would not only equal to what we saw with Jordan Marshall committing, but maybe even more at an alarming rate. Positive, of course, just because of the fact that I think Scott has been such an Ohio State lean for several months. I mean, of all the 2024 prospects right now in Ohio, this is one that the Buckeyes absolutely cannot let leave the state, especially in Ann Arbor. Scott is the best coverage cornerback in press in the country. That's just based on my evaluations on film. Michigan runs a lot of man, so the fit is perfect for him in Ann Arbor. I think reactions would mirror a commitment from Scott if a commitment also possibly occurred from cornerback Bryce West out of Cleveland Glenville. For the better part of this century, I mean, Ohio State has enjoyed a long-standing pipeline with Glenville because of its head coach, Ted Ginn Sr., being the father of Ted Ginn Jr., and previously coaching guys like Marshawn Lattimore and Cardale Jones. But the prioritization of West, I think, from Steve Klingscale and the 4 Ohio verbal commits in the 2024 class has made things very interesting. Another key factor with this recruitment is that West has a really close friendship with Jacob Oden, who's out of Harper Woods, Michigan, and is an On3 defensive back commit. Oden has really vocalized his efforts to bring both West and Scott on board. West last visited in January with Oden together, like they went to campus alone, so it was really personalized for them too. And while both of them were uncommitted at the time, and then West went to the Michigan State game in October. We'll see what happens when official visits get underway, if Michigan's able to gain that more important momentum, because I still think Ohio State leads in this one. There's another Cleveland Glenville teammate that visited in January as well, tight end Demarion Whitten. I got the chance to evaluate Whitten at a camp in Central Indiana in February, and he's very effective, I think, in the way that he uses his 6'4" and 215-pound body in one-on-one drills against smaller defensive backs. He can even be slotted in the wide receiver position, I think, if Michigan wants him there. Whitten has a really good relationship with Steve Klingscale and tight ends coach Grant Newsome. And he said that, in interviews that I did with him, he said that the amount of run blocking that Michigan tight ends do in the games about the most, just because about the program. That's his favorite aspect about the position, actually. You don't really hear that much. But so really, what better way to showcase that talent with the team that commits to running the ball, right? And then in 2024, Michigan is also pushing for 3 offensive linemen. 2 of them are actually twins and are teammates of Roebuck at St. Edward. In guard Devontae Armstrong and tackle Deontay Armstrong. Both are listed in the top 250 nationally, according to On3, and visited together for Michigan's Junior Day events. The prioritization, I think, that Sharon Moore and Steve Klingscale, that they showed Ben Roebuck, are being very reciprocated to the brothers as well. I think it'll be a little bit tougher to pull the pair from Ohio State, as they grew up fans of the Buckeyes and were each offered by the team. But I think the chemistry between the three would just translate swimmingly at Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other offensive lineman is on 300 interior target William Satterthwaite out of Akron. He took his first visit to Ann Arbor last weekend and was told by Sharon Moore that he is a top option at either guard or center. His high school head coach at one of the premier powerhouses in that city, in Archbishop Hoban, also grew up with Steve Klingsdale. So Satterthwaite has been in contact with the co-defensive coordinator since his sophomore year. A lot of the SEC schools, and quite frankly, like nationally, have, shown a lot of interest and have really entered the mix for Satterthwaite. Georgia, Alabama, and others have formally offered. But I think the visit put Michigan in the top group for him moving forward, this offseason. Mm-hmm. So I think an official visit as well could happen sometime in June or maybe even later in the fall if he extends his recruitment. So all in all, there's a lot of talent in Ohio that Michigan is trying to pluck. And I think it's just the beginning with Jordan Marshall, Ben Roebuck, Luke Hamilton, and Ted Hammond. I mean, there's 4 right now, but it could be more.
Yeah, these are really good signs. I mean, there's always been a boatload of talent in Ohio. And, we older guys remember the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s when the roster was loaded with Ohio kids. Michigan went head-to-head with Ohio State every year back in the day. What's changed, in your opinion, recently that has these kids from Ohio State country considering the team up north?
I mean, I travel to Ohio a lot for good reason, to see these kids and, tell their stories. And, whenever I talk to my family and, the fact that I'm in Ohio, almost every week and let them know where I'm at. My dad always says, back in his time, Bo Schembechler could walk into any home down there and take any recruit who he wanted in Ohio. I think in the present day, if Michigan remains a key player in Ohio these next few cycles, I think we'll be talking about Steve Klingsdale in the same manner that I think the older generations talk about Bo with recruiting, as someone who was born and raised in Youngstown, graduated from Ashland University, which is southwest of Akron. He spent 7 years there as assistant coach, then 3 years at Toledo, and then 3 years at Cincinnati, and then, carried over those connections to nearby Kentucky for years. Klingsdale has made himself, a respected, popular, looked up upon figure in the States for pretty much 3 decades now. He talked to players, coaches, trainers, parents. I even spoke to a principal once. They all have something good to say about Klingsdale. I think I've tried to put together like common phrases that people have best described him as, and honesty, relatability, no nonsense, truthful, will always tell it how it is. I mean, that's really what gets brought up the most. I remember one person in Ohio, can't remember who right now off the top of my head, but there was one person called Klingsdale the ideal hybrid between a college coach and surrogate parent to recruits. It just goes to show that Michigan's invasion of Ohio with recruiting starts and ends with Klingsdale. He successfully landed 4 signees from the state in the 2023 class, obviously, and he's played a large role with the 4 commits in the 2024 class, and he's well on his way to potentially landing more. So as long as he's on staff, I really don't see this movement coming to a halt anytime soon.
Well, all good news, and he is a great recruiter. We know that, so hopefully he keeps mining the talent down there. Last weekend, though, a lot of talent on campus, a huge visit weekend. But the one name I get asked about the most, and I know you guys hear it all the time too, is Jaden Davis. I know he's set to, we're recording again on Friday, I think he's set to release a top 5 list. I haven't seen that yet, but what do you think's going on with him?
Yeah, so what we know of Jaden Davis right now, at the time of this recording, is by 5 p.m. Eastern Time later today, so Friday, Davis will drop a top 5, as you mentioned. I think any negative thoughts of Michigan not being on that list or being one of the 5 added, can be thrown out, because it's going to be a guarantee he will be on that list. And then next Friday, it was reported that Davis will make his formal commitment public. So less than 24 hours before the spring game on April 1st. I have no reason to believe that Davis will not pick the Wolverines. I've had a prediction for Michigan in favor of the quarterback from Charlotte, North Carolina, going back to August. So that was after he took his second visit for the barbecue at the Big House. I think the timing of both events, so dropping the top 5 and then announcing his commitment date, isn't much of a coincidence in my opinion, considering he returned last weekend with his family to meet with new quarterbacks coach Kirk Campbell in person. I think the unknown of Campbell at the beginning, not seeing him in person, not really knowing his philosophies or attitudes once Matt Weiss was fired, meant the family needed to understand that about Campbell, in a formal setting, so practice. And I think from everything that the Wolverine has gathered on Davis's weekend visit, he was able to connect really well, again, with head coach Jim Harbaugh, and they really took a liking to Campbell as a coach, which mirrors what other quarterback targets have said, on their visits and conversations with him. So all in all, I expect the spring game visit next Saturday to have a joyous atmosphere, knowing that Michigan got their quarterback of the future less than 24 hours before the exhibition.
Well, a lot of Michigan fans will be happy if that is indeed the situation. But as they say, stay tuned. If we could, Zach, again, last weekend was a huge visit weekend, as we mentioned. If I could get your thoughts on a few of the kids that were in town for the visit, and this is in no particular order, and you can just give us your take on them and what Michigan's chances are of landing some of them. Let's start with running back Harry Stewart. He's out of Frisco, Texas, Centennial High School. Your take on him?
Harry Stewart's visit to Michigan last week was kind of unique. He actually was there Tuesday, so a lot of overarching views of the program that day. So, checking out the facilities, looking at the weight room, looking around campus, just seeing what Michigan can provide resource-wise. And then he came back on Friday to watch practice. So 2 visits. So technically he took 2 visits in a week. But, since they're so close apart, we can consider it one big visit. Michigan, I think, was one of the top schools already for him. But this visit really solidified it for him. I think he would be an excellent running back 2 option for Hart in his group next to Marshall. Stewart was one of the guys who got offered by Mike Hart when Hart made his crazy recruiting swing through Texas during the January contact period. I mean, we could spend hours talking about Hart in his, in the way he recruited that month. But I think the relationship is quickly getting close between Stewart and Hart, and I think Michigan certainly landed in Stewart's top 3, and then which ultimately will lead to getting an official visit. All the talk is Taylor Tatum out of Texas, to complement Jordan Marshall for 2 top 100 guys. But, if Michigan pushes hard for him, Stewart could easily join this class and, play another complement role to Jordan. And I think these 2 visits, really got him interested, if not more than what he already saw or experienced when he got the offer.
Well, there was another really interesting prospect in town last weekend, running back Darian Dupree. He's out of Chicago, Mount Carmel High School. I think Notre Dame's big on him too, aren't they?
Yes, Notre Dame has offered. Notre Dame, as we know, is about an hour or 2 away from Chicago. If you're going to recruit Chicago, you got to recruit the Catholic League. I mean, historically a gold mine for Power 5 recruits annually, with Mount Carmel being the gold standard. With Dupree, he was one that I was high on for a while. He's been on my radar since the last April, so we're going about 11 months now that I've known Dupree. People there, figureheads and recruiters and, local people have said, talked high about Dupree, and I think he really saw a fast rise in his recruitment during the contact period 2 months ago. Michigan was one of them that offered. He is very versatile in the way that he plays the running back of this position, very complete, excellent in the run game, in the pass game. One of the preferred weapons for head coach Jordan Lynch, who, as people might know, Jordan Lynch was a former Heisman Trophy candidate. So really good coaching there. And really good leadership, for a kid like Dupree. He told me once that during his talks with Mike Hart at the beginning, there was a lot of similarities that Dupree saw with Hart to his stepfather. His stepfather actually played for Michigan State at the turn of the century. So he kind of understands, the recruiting process and certainly Mike Hart. But I think the way they speak to Dupree and I guess they talk about football and life in general, I think Dupree saw similarities. And I think that's allowed him to get close with Mike Hart and obviously went for the visit last weekend. And Michigan's firmly in his top 5 now for Dupree. And just like with Stewart, he would be an excellent running back too if they miss out on Taylor Tatum. But I think with Michigan's presence in Chicago these past 4 or 5 cycles, anyone in that area appreciates what Michigan has brought to the table and what it's done with its guys in the past. And obviously Dupree recognizes that too. So again, with Stewart, if they continue to push hard, Dupree could easily be in this class and play that role that Cole Cabana was lauded for when he committed last year.
Well, there are a couple of wide receivers that were in for the visit last weekend, so I'll just sort of lump them together and get your thoughts. One was Micah Gilbert from Charlotte, North Carolina Christian High School. The other was Joshua Jackson from down in SEC country, from New Orleans, St. Augustine. Your thoughts on them?
Yeah, so Josh Jackson, this was his first time. He was offered last year by wide receivers coach Ron Bellamy. As you mentioned, he's from Louisiana, actually from New Orleans, which is, where Ron Bellamy grew up. Ron has been a very influential figure in Metro Detroit, obviously from his 10 years or over a decade long of coaching at West Bloomfield High. And with his Southern connections, he's really been able to develop relationships and bring up some guys from the deep South to Michigan. We're talking about Amarion Walker, Carmelo English, and Josh Jackson could be that next guy. Josh really said that their similarities in background and upbringing, from the Louisiana connection really helped them connect. During the visit, they sat down individually and broke down film, and Bellamy was asking Josh how wide receivers looked in practice, and that really propelled Michigan to being a top school right now. Schools in the South like Ole Miss and Florida State are set to host them this spring too, but I think he's another guy who, if Michigan really wants and wants to push, I think they would end up having the lead, and I would expect him to commit if he wants to. With Gilbert, we talk a lot about Charlotte Providence Day with Jaden Davis and his teammates, but Micah Gilbert's another who visited. He's one that, again, really connected with Coach Bellamy on the visit. He said he was really impressed with the campus, the facilities, things like the weight room, little things, I guess, like restaurants that are available around town. He was mentioning in practice that how up-tempo and organized the practice was, very meticulous, that he mentioned to E.J. Holland in his interview with him about the way Coach Bellamy is with that practice. He was one that got offered a while ago and still was able to get back for this time. He also mentioned to E.J. that getting back to campus may occur on spring 1st. But again, another one that Michigan is high on his list. And I think he will consider them a priority moving forward, if Michigan does too. So, I think competition in the South will always be fierce for guys down there. But again, someone, if they push, can easily be in this class and potentially be another one from North Carolina to represent the 2024 class.
Well, one of our in-state kids that was there last weekend, I'm sort of surprised he hasn't pulled the trigger and committed to Michigan yet, but tight end Brady Priskun from Rochester Adams High School, what's up with him?
Yeah, Brady's interesting. A kid who's not very, who doesn't go public much with his updates on his recruitment, but I think he wants it that way. He is someone who will do things behind the scenes, I guess. His visit last weekend to Michigan was actually the first time back since basketball season started. So in Michigan, it starts in November. He actually didn't visit any school these past 4 months. Sole concentration was on basketball. But Grant Newsome, tight ends coach, made sure to check out 3 of his games. But, getting him back towards the end of the season, season ended on Wednesday for them. So getting them Getting him back as quickly as they did was great job by Newsom. They've been able to relate very well to each other considering their age gap. It's only like a 10-year difference. Priestcorn probably mentioned before with other guests that he's the top prospect on the board for the tight end spot. He really likes the usage of the tight ends by Michigan at practice. He saw guys like Colston Loveland, someone that he thinks if he commits to Michigan, he could learn from easily. Early enrollee Zach Marshall, Priestcorn and Marshall have talked to each other before, but seeing how Marshall has done these past couple of months as an enrollee was really good to see. On the visit, we've talked about Jordan Marshall and Jane Davis. They were able to hang out together. He actually said he's never been able to do that at other schools, like hang out with recruits in the way that Michigan did with them and take photos and vision what it'd be like to play at the big house together. So that was good for them. Pretty much an official visit is locked in at this point for Priestcorn. He dropped the top 8 not too long ago that featured schools like Ole Miss, where his older brother plays, Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, Tennessee, Miami. So there's some really top-tier competition, but I've had a prediction on Priestcorn going back months, and then I don't see a reason to change it on account for Grant Newsom's push for him and just his proximity to Ann Arbor and the amount of visits that he's taken. He's about 45 minutes away. So honestly, we could see him back for the spring game and possibly this weekend as well. He did mention the fact of that. So all in all, it's been about 6 times since he's visited Michigan, and I think going back unofficially isn't out of the question once he starts scheduling them in June for his officials, and then ultimately be committed before the start of the senior year.
Well, another interesting visitor last week was a Michigan legacy. He's another kid I've sort of been waiting for him to say, I'm coming. Blake Frazier out of Austin, Texas, Vandergrift High School. Do you think he's waffling, taking his time? What's going on with him?
Yeah, like you mentioned, Michigan legacy. He's the son of Steve Frazier, who was the starting center for Tom Brady during the late 90s, part of the 1997 team. In terms of photos that recruits posted last weekend, his photo with his father inside that tunnel was probably one of the best ones that I saw. He returned back for the Maryland game. The family actually spent about 3 days on campus, even though it was unofficial. It was treated like an official just for how long he was there. For that entire time, he got time to hang out with guys like Luke Hamilton, the 2024 interior offensive line commits, Ben Roebuck, these offensive line targets and commits that desperately want Blake Frazier to join the class. Both EJ Holland and I have had predictions on him for a little bit. Mine was actually 2 weeks ago, just before the visit. I think he's one that will drop a top list soon and take its official visits. Schools like Clemson, Texas A&M, LSU, these schools are making big pushes as well. So I don't expect him to commit on the spot or commit right after the visit, similar to what Ben Roebuck did. I think he's one that will take his time a little bit and see what's going on or what else is available. But I think, like we mentioned, continuing the footsteps of his father, a national champion, and playing for guys that are deep in Michigan history entrenched. But I think this is one that Michigan set up itself very well on last weekend to get that tackle target out of Austin.
Well, those are just a few of the names I picked out to throw at you. But again, it was a huge visit weekend. So who are some of the other kids on hand Michigan has a really good chance of getting in?
Yeah, so a recruit who visited last week where Michigan is rightfully maintaining a lead for, I checked this out during the On3 recruiting prediction machine, is On 300 interior offensive line target Max Anderson, who's a fellow native of Frisco, Texas, like Harry Stewart. Anderson spent a couple of days on campus alongside Hamilton and would include the Wolverines in his top 8. That was released on Thursday. Hamilton is doing everything possible. He's even mentioned to me, he's doing everything possible to have Anderson commit. They're actually going to be taking their respective official visits on the weekend of June 16th and 18th. Anderson told us, the Wolverine, after the visit was over of those dates, and then Hamilton told us that he was going up as well. That particular weekend, I think, is going to be, or is going to look like, or looking like, a huge representation of offensive line targets and commits. I wouldn't be surprised really either if Ben Roebuck takes his then, maybe Blake Frazier takes his then. Another offensive line target that visited last week for the third time was interior target Jake Guarnera out of suburban Jacksonville. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes his official visit that weekend either once he drops his top four following spring camp visits next month. In regards to Anderson, a prediction was already made by On3's national recruiting analyst Sam Spiegelman. He actually covers the Lone Star State, so look out, I think, for myself and EJ Holland to do the same soon as Jerome Moore grabs more guys who are top rated from out of state, especially in Texas.
Well, another kid I wanted to talk about was wide receiver Channing Goodwin. He, of course, is from Charlotte Day and a teammate of Jaden Davis. And to add on to that, he's a Michigan legacy. Where do we stand with him?
Yeah, so I think around the time of the 2022 season when Goodwin visited Michigan for the third time that year for the Hawaii game, I think if you asked me then which target from Providence Day would commit to the Wolverines first, I would have said Goodwin, the legacy wideout. His 5 total trips to Ann Arbor that year, he took 5 total trips to Ann Arbor for that year. For the games against Michigan State, Penn State. He went up in June for his debut, and then he went for the barbecue. He was back on campus earlier this month with another offered wideout teammate in Jordan Shipp. So, going back to what you said, was just him being a legacy and the son of former Michigan offensive lineman and Super Bowl champion Jonathan Goodwin. I think the cards are just falling in the right place for Goodwin to be added onto the verbal commit list for Michigan. Now, I do think that heavy pushes from NC State and North Carolina have resulted, I think, in Goodwin taking his time for a bit. I put in my prediction for him to choose Michigan back in August, and I'm not planning on flipping it elsewhere anytime soon.
Well, this weekend, another big visit weekend, as you would expect with spring football in full swing right now. So who are some of the names we're going to see visiting this week you can share with us?
Yeah, so this weekend's going to be another star-studded visit list, which features 1 verbal commit and 2 priority quarterbacks in the 2025 class. First up, cornerback Chris Ewald out of Hollywood, Chaminade, Madonna in South Florida. He committed in December, and this is his first time back going up to Michigan since his commitment. He is one where, it's interesting, I think, for kids in 2025, some fans might get pessimistic that it's just a commit and, things can happen before December of 2024. But, if you follow him along on social media, he is one that is very pro-Michigan in his posts. That's despite him saying that, he wasn't going to shut down his recruitment when he committed. And, he's taken visits to Florida State, LSU, he's looking at Alabama as well. The Michigan's coaching staff is very supportive in Chris doing that as well, especially Steve Klingsdale. They want him to enjoy that process. They want him to see what other schools have to offer because, you really only get this one. In terms of Michigan, he's really getting to know the 2024 commits. Like I said, he's posting a ton of interactions with the other commits. He has a close relationship with Mantrez Walker, his fellow 2025 commit out of Beaufort, Georgia. He absolutely loves the coaching staff, especially guys like Steve Klingsdale, Denard Robinson, who grew up 2 towns north of Ewald. There's a funny story where, Ewald has, talked to Denard every time he's on campus, but, they first met when Ewald was a small child, and Denard was hosting his, summer camps for youth football players in South Florida. So there's that connection. I think most, some people don't. I don't think some people know how much he visited before the commitment either. Like, it was 4 or 5 times before Ewald committed. So he saw Michigan quite a ton. It wasn't just an out of the blue decision or without much thinking. Like, he was able to see practice, check out the big house, go to the barbecue, go to the Penn State game. So he's seen a lot of what Michigan has to offer. And, him coming back just shows I think that he's serious about committing. And that's just great for Michigan fans that you have the top 5 cornerback in the 2025 class from South Florida, of all places, ready to come to Michigan. Ewald is going to be bringing one of his Chaminade Madonna teammates in four-star defensive back Zaquan Patterson. He's a 6'1", 195-pound defensive standout. He has the frame to play linebacker, but he's one that's being looked at defensive back. He's known Steve Clinkstale throughout his high school career, going all the way back to the beginning of his freshman year. They talk pretty much every day. Everything that Ohio individuals think about Clinkstale is very, has been said by Patterson in past interviews. EJ and I have seen him live at least once this offseason, so we've gotten a good idea of just how much of a leader, a vocal candidate, someone who has great length, very aggressive off the ball, good in press coverage. So he would be a great addition, not just for the fact that he's teammates with Ewald, but just a bigger body that defensive backs would fit Clinkstale's ideal mold of his group. Again, he's very close with Ewald. They visited together for the Penn State game. I think for a kid from South Florida going up to the Big House for one of the biggest games of the year, 110,000 fans packed in the stands, that says something, especially when you walk out of the tunnel and fans are chanting for you to join and they know you already. So, it's big for Michigan to get him up with Ewald as well. Florida State, Miami, Georgia, these are schools that are pushing hard for Zaquan as well. But if, this visit, I think, solidify the fact that Michigan will at least get an official visit at some point this offseason. Of the two quarterbacks I just mentioned, 2025 class, one of them is Cutter Bully out of Lexington, Kentucky. Top 100 prospect right now, according to On3. This will be his fifth time visiting Michigan in total. He made more than one trip last year. His first visit saw him getting a tour of the entire campus by Jim Harbaugh himself. He was back for the Michigan State game, and then they had barbecue at the Big House. This is one who currently trains with the 7-on-7 program that in Nashville that has really profound connections with Steve Clinkstale, so there's that connection. Bully actually attends high school that's rivals with the high school that Steve Clinkstale's son attends, so there's that as well. Bully has mentioned in past articles, we met when he told us that he was visiting, we asked him about Kurt Campbell and, everything that went down in earlier in the offseason, and Bully has been very impressed with the way Campbell presents himself over the phone, and he seems like a very enthusiastic guy, and I think that's been the basis for what quarterbacks I've seen out of Campbell, and Bully is one. He is a 6'5", 205 pounds, a lot of velocity in his arm, one of the very big leader, comfortable in the pocket, plays with guys like Luke Carter, Martellus Carter, these guys from Tennessee. Oh, Mason Curtis, another 2024 commit, guys that are also, played or are being targeted for Michigan. It's going to be nice to see what happens with Bully because, there's competition from Tennessee and Kentucky and all these schools around his area, but Michigan has certainly made him a top target right now. Another quarterback, Stone Saunders out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He's the reigning Gatorade Player of the Year for his state last year after throwing for 3,000 yards and winning a state championship. This visit back will be his first time back since last offseason. I think interest picked up with him for Michigan now that Kurt Campbell's in the fold. Campbell is a Pittsburgh native, so they have that Pennsylvania connection. Stone was one that was one of the first to talk to Campbell. Saunders was impressed with just the fact that Campbell knew about him, knew about his game, knew about his success. He's also a Max Preps All-American. I think interest may have died or not died, but just winded down or it decreased with Matt Weiss when Matt Weiss was the coach. But now that Saunders has heard from Campbell and they got him on campus as quickly as they did, I think that's just one more added QB target to the 25 class for Michigan, and that's great. They're really expanding the board with that class, and not only expanding the board, but doing so with guys who are accomplished on the field and then are rated high by On3 in the recruiting services. Michigan's bringing in a kid from California who is a former Ole Miss commit in Jordan Lockhart from St. John Bosco. Lockhart has known Chris Partridge, actually, the new linebackers coach, for several months, going all the way back to when he committed. As we know, Partridge left Michigan the first time around to coach the Rebels as co-defense coordinator and safeties coach. So, Lockhart was on board for that team for well over a year. He recently decommitted in Yeah, earlier this offseason. He told me that he wanted to take a visit as soon as possible, just, to reconnect with Partridge and see him in his new setting. And Lockhart was able to secure that visit this weekend. So, Michigan has firmly put himself in the mix now that Partridge is on board for Lockhart. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Two more guys, both on the offensive side of the ball. First up is wideout Amarion Stewart out of Bolingbrook, Illinois, so west of Chicago. Amarion is, as people have followed his recruitment recently, a very big favorite to choose Michigan, his school in particular. They have recruited out of that school before. Tyler McLaurin, linebacker, is former teammates with Amarion. He's also really good friends with wideout Tyler Morris. They actually played on the same 7-on-7 team together, Midwest Boom in Chicago. Amarion is also known J.J. McCarthy because McCarthy played for that 7-on-7 team. A.J. Henning as well did so too. Amarion was there for January visit, and then he was there for the Michigan State game and then the UConn game last year. Very close relationship with Ron Bellamy. They've connected on and off the field. I've seen him play multiple times, same as E.J. Holland. He always ends up being the best player at every event that he goes to. I think his communication still with guys like Tyler, because they're really, really close, is helping Michigan lead the way in this. He's already locked in an official visit with Michigan, same with Oregon and Tennessee and others. I've had a prediction on him for a while, and that won't change. And then finally, tight end Max LeBlanc out of Tennessee. He's going to make his first ever visit this weekend after being offered by Coach Newsom. Newsom has really narrowed his focus on tight ends in 2024. Obviously, Brady Scoring is going to be the top guy, but, Max LeBlanc is certainly one that's has risen fast on the On3 ranking and has gotten a lot of big-time offers, including Michigan. He talked to E.J. Holland at the Atlanta Under Armour camp, and he's looking forward to just seeing what Michigan has to offer and learning more about Newsom. I think Newsom is one that Michigan fans need to know in terms from recruiting perspective, because as we said before, he's young. He knows what it takes to play in Michigan, and he's as enthusiastic as everyone else on the coaching staff to hit the trail. So it'll be good to see where Max stands on the board following this visit.
Well, a very impressive list of young athletes that you just mentioned again in town this weekend. A lot of elite quarterback talent. But when we talk about quarterback talent, Zach, it seems like the one person that I hear about the most is right here in our backyard, Belleville's Bryce Underwood, a 5-star kid rated number 1 in the country. And it sounds like in recent weeks or the last couple of months, he, and more importantly his dad, really like the way Michigan is recruiting him now, doesn't he?
Yeah, quarterback recruiting in the 25 class for Michigan, is head over heels in a much better spot than 2024 and 2023 because of the fact that Michigan is prioritizing more than one target. Of the group of offered 25 quarterbacks who have already or are going to visit this month, Bryce Underwood, as you mentioned, he has the most talent. He has the highest ceiling. He has the most moxie. He's clearly the best. He is a winner, 2-time state champion in Michigan at the Division I level. Keep in mind, too, that he's young enough to where he could have classified in the 2026 class if he wanted to. He's still 15. He's months away from turning 16. He reminds me a lot of Cam Newton, bigger body, dual threat weapon. I think that should be how Underwood's career plays out if everything goes right from now until then. He did visit twice this month in order to connect with Kurt Campbell in person. He told the Wolverine that his relationship with Campbell is going to be stronger than how it was with Matt Weiss, which was great, right off the bat. From a storyline perspective, Michigan should do everything possible to keep the hometown prodigy coming back to visit. He actually attends high school located less than 30 minutes away from Michigan's campus. Also wouldn't be a major blow if Underwood wants to leave the state. Certainly he's the top target, and you want him first. But I wouldn't call it a major blow just for the fact that Cutter Boley, Stone Saunders, George McIntyre, Ryan Montgomery, they're not secondary options. They're also ranked in the top 100. They're also 4 stars. They could also end up being 5 stars once they're in college. These guys also understand, I think the opportunity to learn under a guy like Kurt Campbell, I think that's been a big difference maker in how Michigan is viewed. There was also interest before, but I think Kurt Campbell steps up a notch, and Underwood could also come back. Guys like Underwood could also come back for a spring game, and he has the option to really come back anytime he wants because he's so close to Michigan. So yeah, I think the difference in how Michigan was viewed by Underwood maybe 3 months ago, 5 months ago, 4 months ago can't be compared to how it's viewed now that Kirk Campbell has been able to connect with both him and his father.
Well, I guess the question a lot of us have is, he's a young guy. As you said, he's 15 years old. He won't turn 16 for a while yet. But if Jaden Davis commits, let's say next week, from what I hear, I heard you and EJ talking about this on the Wolverine podcast, I think, recently. That doesn't seem to faze Underwood, that if Jaden Davis comes, that's the end of the recruiting process at Michigan for him. But, still, when you think of it, if you get Jaden Davis and then you get a commitment from Underwood, picking up 2 quarterbacks in 2 years with that kind of talent is the stuff dreams are made of, isn't it?
Yeah, Michigan hasn't gotten a true quarterback or a top-level quarterback since 2021 with J.J. McCarthy. Non-project guys, I guess. Let's say Jaden Davis does commit, right, next week. Everyone in 2025 understands, there's going to be a top guy in the 2024 class at the quarterback position at any school that they sign with, not just Michigan. That's just the reality of quarterback recruiting, whether it's fair or not. You take one guy and you roll with it. I think, top prospects go to top schools where other top guys are present. I think having Jaden Davis, let's say Jaden goes to Michigan, it only makes guys like Underwood motivated to prove why they deserve to be higher in the depth chart of their teammates. That same mindset will run through Davis as well. But you're right. If add Davis and one of his preferred 2025 quarterbacks like Underwood, helps seal Kirk Campbell's case for why he deserves promotion back in January. And, as we keep talking about Kirk Campbell, he's done everything right so far to, for Michigan quarterback recruiting to be more positive and, not have any connotations of negativity as we've seen in the past.
And not to get on Matt Weiss, there's been a lot said about his lack of recruiting or his personality when it came to interacting with these young athletes. But Kirk Campbell appears to be a huge upgrade on so many levels, doesn't he?
Yeah, in the last 2 months, in the last 2 months that Kirk Campbell's been on staff, he's brought a newfound sense of energy on the recruiting trail. We know that Weiss was excellent with the analytics and the X's and O's side of the job. I think even he admitted that, the element of recruiting just wasn't there when he was with the NFL. So there was a lot of learning to do. Campbell's been in the college game long enough to know exactly what's expected. And we've seen that, he's brought a newfound sense of energy, that upbeat personality and determination to prove why he belongs on staff. That's not just when he's talking to recruits over the phone or families over the phone or sitting down with them on individual meetings. He's shown that on the practice field. Every quarterback who's visited Michigan this month, whether they've had an offer or not, 2024 through 2026, they've mentioned how hands-on Campbell is with the quarterbacks, how much he's brought into the Michigan, how much he's bought into the Michigan brand, and how much he goes out of his way to make every quarterback visitor feel at home. And certainly his knowledge of their respective games after evaluating their tape for hours and hours. Simply put, Michigan couldn't have asked for a better quarterback coach right now, and it's going to keep trending upwards from here.
Well, final question before we let you get away, Zach, and we've had talked about some good stuff today, but, I think we have to say Jim Harbaugh, we know, has put together a great coaching staff. It hasn't, in his tenure, always been a great recruiting staff, though, but right now it seems like every one of these coaches on the staff have taken recruiting to another level, haven't they?
I don't have the longevity of the Michigan recruiting beat, compared to, let's say, my colleague EJ Holland. This month will actually mark 13 months of on the job for me. So in that time frame, I've always thought that the Michigan coaching staff recruited well. Sure, there were bumps along the way that were out of the staff's control during the 2023 cycle, or there were some assistants who've left that were replaced by others with stronger ties in key areas. But the consistency of winning, plus more progress being made with NIL, hopefully, will certainly complement the efforts of the coaching staff. Jim Harbaugh remains as good of a closer as ever. There are new faces in the fold like Kirk Campbell and linebackers coach Chris Partridge, who've gotten the ball rolling early with visits and everything. there are always going to be the mainstays like Ron Bellamy, Jay Harbaugh, Steve Klingsdale, and Mike Elson, who will bring their own unique talents to connect with recruits. I mean, it's certainly just, I can't, in those 13 months, I mean, this is probably the most fun that you can have covering recruiting. And it's certainly a fun time right now to follow recruiting if you're a Michigan fan. We at the Wolverine continue to provide factual, hard-hitting, consistent, detailed content. I mean, that will reflect, as we continue seeing more momentum on the recruiting trail and more of a, as more top talent talks about how great this coaching staff is. I think all the criticism in 23, again, I think it's out of the coaching staff's control, and I think 2024 will see what Michigan is really, truly made of on the recruiting trail, and that's fun to watch.
Well, as you said, Zach, really great times to follow recruiting for you and for fans right now, and we still have a lot of news that's going to break in the coming weeks and months. And to do that, I always tell Michigan fans when I have you guys on from the Wolverine On3, you have to subscribe. There's so much news that we get every day from you guys. So before we let you get away, let's put a plug in for the Wolverine On3 and talk about subscription rates right now and any deals going on.
Yeah, so for $29.99, you can subscribe to the Wolverine a month. That gives you access to exclusive football and basketball team and recruiting coverage. The spring game is next week. We have possibly a quarterback committing to the fold next week too, so it's a fun time. The coverage gives you all the way through spring evaluation period if you're a recruiting fan, official visits in the summer, and then it gears up for fall camp in August. Michigan, as we know, is gearing for another college football playoff run, so what better time to subscribe to the Wolverine?
Absolutely, gang. Check it out. Here with us today, for the first time, has been recruiting writer Zach Libby from the Wolverine On3 with a lot of great information that he's passed along, and rest assured, it won't be the last time, and we look forward to that next visit, Zach.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate having me on.
On Quick Hits today, next week is the spring game, and who knows, between now and then, we might even have more commits to talk about. On Friday, Jaden Davis dropped his top 5 list, and as expected, Michigan was on it. He is scheduled to make his commitment next Friday, so as they say, stay tuned. That does it for now, though. Make sure you tell your amazing Blue family and friends about the show, and join us again next week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go Blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!